With not much to do in this awful weather weekend, I've decided to sniff around my old computer disks. I remember having one disk on which I have kept old videos I have made with friends about a decade ago. I was pretty sure they were awful. I wanted to see just how bad they were. The so-called skits we have made were pretty bad. Let me rephrase it. They were horrendous. The only funny thing about those old videos is how funny we thought we were there. I mean, the jokes were pretty good. The execution was bloody awful. There were some gaming recordings and animation videos I have made. These were pretty good. I am surprised just how good I was at that. I guess I could have become an animator with a little bit more education. Anyway, I digress. Along with the hundreds of childhood passion projects in that folder was one video that stuck out like a sore thumb. It was titled Concrete Elysium. Now it stuck out because I did not make this video. There was no doubt about it. I did not even know the word Elysium 10 years ago. I must have downloaded it or something, which is likely because other videos in that folder were also downloaded. I have no clue how they got in that folder. I remember organizing everything into separate files even back then. Either way, my curiosity was piqued, and I have decided to check out the long-forgotten file. It was some short film, 50 minutes long start to finish, with the credits and all. At first glance, it seemed to be an amateur project. You would not think otherwise if you saw the opening graphic. The term S-T production in a lazy comic sans font. The title was drifting across the screen before turning into some horribly idiotic Tools production. Admittedly, I found that introductory screen funny. The screen went black after that image for a couple of seconds before the screen turned to someone that was filming the entrance to some cottage somewhere. Someone hooded walked in front of the camera operator, and they did not speak for the duration of their walk towards the cottage. It did not take long, a few moments. Once the hooded person opened the door, he exclaimed, "Welcome to the Elysian fields," before stepping inside. The camera operator followed closely behind. He entered into a room heavily clouded by thick smoke. The audio was filled with the sound of loud coughing, so much so it felt as if people were coughing right beside me. The hooded person signaled the camera operator to follow him, and the duo made their way to a room filled with people laying all over the floor. I have counted 11 of them. The operator just filmed the bunch just lying there, motionless, for about 30 seconds, before they all started twitching and withering uncontrollably. They were spasming and rolling all over the floor uncontrollably, so much so that they were rolling over each other. It made me feel somewhat uncomfortable. I was trying to pick out what sort of film this was meant to be, but it did not fit neatly into any category. I like horror, but this does not seem like it. God forbid it was a snuff film, I thought. The last thing I needed was to keep one of these on a compact disc. Yes, I have seen a few. They are not hard to come by. In fact, snuff is all over the internet. It even slips into platforms like Facebook on occasion. That being said, I kept on watching the peculiar video. The figures on the floor were having some sort of disturbing collective epileptic fit. Something similar to those videos of World War I veterans with shell shock. It had this atmospheric awfulness to it. I was going to turn the video off. I wanted to delete the thing. It was just a little too weird. Good thing the withering figures started laughing after a while. I guess they broke character or something. Whatever this was, it had at least some professional backbone. From there on, the camera operator went on alone. For the rest of the film, he was walking around the various rooms of the cottage, recording whatever he found. The first room he went to on his own was this dimly lit room with a single light bulb hanging at its center. A group of children dressed in all white circled the source of the light without saying a word. The operator waved his hand in front of the camera lens, and the video turned black and white. He kept on filming the children circling the light bulb. Something about the black and white setting made the whole thing seem far worse than I would expect it to be. Things took a turn for the worse when the children suddenly stopped walking and turned their heads in unison towards the operator. Then they did something even creepier. They started waving their hands at him in total sync. It made my skin crawl. The operator said something to the children, something inaudible, before walking out of the room and proceeding to walk towards another room. Now this room had its door slightly open. The operator pushed the door open carefully with one of his hands. It was deliberate, probably in order to create some sort of a dramatic feel to the scene. It did not work out, given that he stepped into a bathroom with someone inside. Their back turned to him. Now that I think about it, though, that was probably on purpose, given what was to come next. The person inside that bathroom was doing something in front of the mirror. You could not see what it was. The operator then yelled out, "Hey!" and the person turned around. It scared the living hell out of me. A face full of what I assume was makeup, which was meant to look like facial musculature. That presentation definitely worked on me. It was so sudden and realistic enough to make me believe the person had flayed their face off, especially because they had a piece of wet leather in one of their arms and a knife in the other. The operator ran out of the room and up a set of stairs. I could hear him breathing heavily, which I assume was acting. Good job to whoever made this. I was already terrified and anxious by the whole thing. That was not the end of it. However, seeing as how once the operator steadied his arms, he opted to turn the camera sharply. In doing so, I was faced with a noose swaying softly in the middle of a hallway. The bastard had to zoom in on the thing. I do not even know why it made me feel so awful. My heart started beating at full speed for some reason. I guess it was the atmosphere of the whole thing which was nearing its ending. By then, the video was at the 10-minute mark. I decided I would finish watching the thing. It could not get much worse than that. The operator walked along the hallway, aiming his camera at the various rooms. There were 4 rooms on each side. All rooms on one side were open and empty for the most part. There was some sort of broken-down furniture in each of them. The operator made sure to display each room thoroughly. I'm not sure why, but they probably did it to distract the viewers from the previous scene. Something tells me whoever made this video knew all too well just how effective this bathroom scene was. It is one of the best so-called gore scenes I have ever seen, and I have seen real-life snuff before. At this point, I became convinced it was definitely a professional film, one that self-acknowledges on top of everything. Anyway, after giving the viewers a tour of the empty rooms, he turned to the other side of the hall, where he opened a door of a peculiarly lit room. There was some light emanating from one wall. That was a nice twist for once, a nice visual, the only pleasant part in the whole film. The light was showering a tall, sickeningly lanky, clearly anguished ballerino. He was attempting to dance, his face contorted in pain with each step he took. The operator zoomed on his face, and you could see tears staining his cheeks. Whatever this was, the commitment to the act was incredible. Either that, or it was one of those actors who can cry on cue. Even so, the whole thing felt authentic and oddly creepy, especially the faces the dancer was making towards the latter part of that scene. I was not too keen on this scene. It definitely pulled a heartstring. I was glad when the operator turned his camera towards the floor and made his way out of that room. From there, he made his way to the final room he was about to film. The video was at about 12 minutes. The operator kept the camera aimed at the floor as he walked to the final room. It took him 20 seconds or so, as he was walking deliberately slowly. You could see him pushing a door open before walking inside and saying something inaudible again, followed by two feminine voices speaking. After that, he lifted his camera and started filming what quickly turned out to be a bed covered in cockroaches. The operator said something again, and two women stepped into the frame. He said something again, and the women proceeded to get onto the bed. My stomach turned as the women just let the disgusting creatures crawl all over them. They were all smiles and giggles as the insects covered them from head to toe. Oddly enough, their eyes seemed hollow and distant. The operator was saying something, and the tone of his speech made me glad I could not understand what he was saying. From there on, just when I thought it could not get any worse, my disgust turned into anxiousness when the sound of a crying woman permeated the scene. Crying and choking, to be more specific. I felt as if I had been submerged into freezing ocean water once the operator turned his camera. In the center of his frame sat a third woman on a wooden chair with her back to him. The sound of crying mixed with choking grew louder, almost to the degree that I could hear it next to me. For a hot second, I thought I could hear it behind me. That is when the strangest thing happened. A slender, serpentine thing came out of where the woman's head was as the sounds of choking intensified. The recording ended a couple of moments later when this serpentine thing appeared to be a hand that ended up blocking the camera lens. Everything turned black abruptly, but the video was not over yet. The audio of a person vomiting flooded my speakers for about 15 seconds. I felt myself getting sick as I heard that. Luckily for me, the noise died down and the video shifted to credits which were just as amateurish as the opening sequence. I sat there for a good 10 minutes afterward, just staring at my video player application, trying to rationalize what on earth I had seen. I could not make any sense of it myself. So, I ended up looking up the film. What was supposed to be a quick search turned into a 2-hour hunt for information about this concrete Elysium. All I could find were a few passing mentions in some old and obscure forums nobody even uses anymore. Apparently, it was made in Sweden in the early 90s, and nobody knows who the participants were or what was the purpose of the film. I could not find any copies or links to the film, sadly. I did find one forum thread which details how allegedly the whole thing was some sort of a cult ritual. According to that thread, the owner of the cottage rented it to a group of young adults for a couple of days. When he came back to collect the keys, he found the property unlocked, with no one inside. He also apparently found bloody puke stains in one of the rooms and bloody handprints all over the window in the same room. Personally, I do not believe that story. To me, it seems like someone tried to capitalize on the mood of the film to generate some buzz online. Either that, or the makers of the film tried to generate some interest in their project with a bigger backstory. If you know anything about Concrete Elysium, let me know. I am genuinely interested in learning more. There has to be something more to this whole thing. I do not know what it is, but I would like to find out. While it is disturbingly weird and at points outright terrifying, it is also morbidly enticing. All in all, if you ever find the movie and do not have an iron stomach, do yourself the favor and do not watch it. The 27th of May was a usual Saturday in Aristes, Pennsylvania. It's a quiet town, so nothing really happens around there. However, it is not far from Centralia, the town on which Silent Hill is based. The one that has a coal mine fire burning under it for a few decades now. Hell, you can't really call Aristes a town. It's just a census-designated place, and the population of this tiny urban area is just over 300 people. I spent that day the usual way I spent my Saturdays, relaxing and trying to forget the dry work routine I have during the rest of the week. I have a job at a nearby textile factory. I'm currently living alone. That is, if you don't count my Labrador, Jessica. I'm a tad bit of a loner. I don't really have many friends, and I don't keep that much in touch with my family. I moved to Aristes to stay away from crowded places. I like my peace like that. There is, however, one person whose company I enjoy around here. His name is Donny Ketch. I met him first when I moved here. I like him because he's this nerdy guy who likes to talk about science fiction, life mysteries, and other unusual things people usually wince at. So on the 27th of May, I was spending my evening at a local bar with my pal Donny, and our conversation somehow drifted towards the subject of torture, specifically mental torture, like the ones they use in the Middle East. Apparently, the Norwegian mass murderer from 2011, Anders Breivik, is currently placed under conditions you might call mental torture. He has every kind of comfort in the world, from a warm bed to video games and newspapers being available to him. However, he is completely isolated from other human beings. Donny even told me that Breivik called his current condition worse than a death sentence, at which I joked I would like to take the man's place at times. We shared a laugh and carried on with our conversation, concluding it with the question of whether mentally torturing someone has an effect on the torturer or not. I think I wanted to check the matter out, but it flew out of my mind once I was thrust back into my weekly routine once again. Wake up really early, walk Jessica, go to work, come back home, shower, walk Jessica, watch some television or something, and go to sleep. All this on repeat. My routine was broken on Wednesday, the 31st of May, when after work, I was riding my bike home and I heard tires squealing all of a sudden. I turned to look to my right and came to see a large truck heading in my direction. I wanted to move out of its way, but it was too late. 1 moment later, I found myself flying through the air and falling on the ground hard. My head and back hurt like never before. Everything went hazy and began to lose color. I could hear people screaming and cars passing nearby for a few moments, but then everything went black. I woke up, I don't know how long after, in a pitch-black room. I tried looking around to try to spot something, or someone, but I couldn't even see my own 2 hands. For a moment, I thought I was dead, and on my way into the afterlife. I screamed, "Hello, anybody there?" No response came, just silence, cold, empty silence. Dread started setting in. I began looking around frantically to try to see something, anything in this black hole. I just couldn't see anything. There was only darkness, and my sense of dread grew stronger. I tried calling again, a few times now. Still no answer. Still only silence and darkness. I started walking backward in hope of finding something. Maybe just a wall, only so I could just feel something. A couple of seconds later, I hit my leg on something hard. I jumped out of my skin with fear. It took me a few moments to collect myself, and then I slowly turned around and started moving my hands in the air, in hopes of finding what my leg had hit before. Turns out it was a bed. Once I realized I was inside a physical building with a bed stationed in it. I figured there must be walls in there too, and an entrance of some sort. So I began searching for the wall. I found it quickly, and began feeling it for some door, or knob, or anything in fact. I circled the whole room I was in, but unfortunately I could not find anything on the wall. It was like someone had placed me in this box, and shut it closed completely, with no ways in or out. Thoughts began to fill the mazes of my mind, ranging from me being dead to someone playing some sick joke on me. But who in the world would do such a thing? My sense of dread turned into anger by this point, and I began banging my fists on the wall, shouting to be released. Soon enough, my head and back began hurting again. This helped me realize that I was in fact alive. However, it also made me realize I was stuck God knows where. Then something even worse happened. I remembered I lived alone with a dog. Anger was quickly replaced with a bad case of dread again. Thus I began banging on the wall and screaming again, ignoring my aching body. No release came, and after a few minutes of beating myself against a wall, I fell to my knees and started weeping, mostly because of the realization that I wasn't in control of what was going to happen to me. I ended up dragging myself to the bed I had come across earlier and sitting next to it. All the while, I bitched like a little girl, begging to be let out. I suppose mental exhaustion made me pass out some time later, because I found myself actually waking up in the same position I was before I passed out, seated, leaning against the bedside. When I woke up, the sheets felt wet against my back. I got up to my feet and began looking up, trying to find the source of the humidity, perhaps that would lead me to an escape route or to my captor. I couldn't find anything, just a bloody black hole of a room with a bed positioned slightly off its center. An idea crossed my mind to look under the bed. Maybe there was something there. Much to my delight, I found a small polystyrene box underneath it. I opened the box and touched its contents. There was water and what felt like some mash. I licked my finger, the one that touched the mash, and it had a familiar taste: rice. Not thinking twice, I consumed the contents of the box, reaffirming my belief that someone had held me inside this cursed room. After I was done stuffing down the rice and drinking the water, most of which dripped all over my clothes, I threw away the box and began cursing at my presumed captor. The room was so bloody quiet. I was sure I was going to lose my mind there. I was already feeling dread at that point. I tried talking to myself. I tried walking around the room, but nothing made the dread walk away. I felt as if I was wearing it, as if it was part of my skin. At some point, I started thinking about Jessica again. I was worried about the poor thing. She was probably worried sick as to where her beloved owner had disappeared to. Soon enough, I noticed something that I cannot wrap my mind around even today: the small polystyrene box. It was gone. It was nowhere in sight. By then, I was certain someone was messing with me. I cursed my heart into the space filling the air, blessing my presumed captor with all sorts of curses, but nothing came of it. I began questioning my sanity and then decided to just lie down on the bed and do nothing, hoping this would end my tenure in this place for some odd reason. I guess I was really losing it there. I lay down on the bed. The sheets felt wet. Still, I tried thinking of something to distract myself from the situation, but nothing specific crossed my mind. It was this storm of fragmented thoughts, like a bad case of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. After twisting and turning in the bed for some time, I decided to take a nap, thinking it might help me calm down. I couldn't fall asleep. Thoughts, random thoughts, all fragmented, something about fire and smoke, coming and going. After some time, things became real fun. I started seeing flashes of light floating around in the air in my peripheral vision. I thought it was just my exhaustion, and rubbed my eyes to make them go away. But they wouldn't. Fire and smoke began filling my mind again. I don't know why. I have no idea why. It just came and it stuck. I jolted out of the bed, and the flashes stopped appearing in my vision. I sat on the bed for I don't even know how long, must have been hours, and stared at the darkness. My mind was blank. I was beginning to relax. However, after what seemed like a long time, I was sure I saw a person wearing all black, and a gas mask standing at the edge of the room. staring at me with its head tilted slightly to the side. I called out to the person, but it would not respond. I called out again, this time rising onto my legs. No response still. I called a third time as I began walking towards that thing which was staring at me, but by the time I took 2 steps forward, he was gone. I froze in my place. Dread set in once more. The sensation was stronger than before, and chills ran all over my body. Without even noticing, I dropped an expletive in a loud scream and ran towards the wall I was facing, banging my fists against it as hard as I could, screaming bloody murder. I kept screaming obscenities and hitting the wall until I collapsed on the floor. I woke up sometime later. At the same spot, I collapsed. I got back up to my feet, and to my surprise, there was a polystyrene box placed next to me. I picked it up and began to feel the anger build up inside my body, burning its way through each and every inch of my being. I crumpled the box in my hand and threw it on the floor, spilling its contents all over the floor, once again shouting obscenities into the air. I began pacing around the room restlessly, filled with anger, trying to find a way out of the nightmare I was stuck in. I kept on pacing and pacing restlessly. I only sat down when my feet began aching. That is when I heard something, a noise. It sounded a bit like static. I got back up and began looking around for the source of the noise, but there was none. However, the noise became louder and louder with each passing second as I frantically looked for a sort of audio transmitter or some other noise-producing apparatus. Soon enough, I began hearing instruments. There were tribal war drums, violins, stringed instruments, even a bagpipe. I clutched at my ears, begging into the air for someone to make the noises stop, but they kept getting louder and louder. Suddenly, something flashed past my side. I turned and saw a man lying on the bed, wearing a gas mask. I do not know why I had done this, but I ran towards the bed with my arms stretched out in hopes to grab the masked man by the neck. The moment I reached the bed, however, the man was gone and the noise had stopped. I fell to the floor. At that moment I realized I had lost my mind completely. Dread once again ran its course around my aching body. I just sat there, motionless, dreading for my life, dreading what I might do to myself the next time I see something that isn't there. I kept on sitting there until I got hungry, and I was wondering how long I could last without food in the hellhole I was stuck in, that is, until I remembered I had some rice spilled on the floor earlier. Being in my position, I simply crawled over to the rice on the floor and ate it, almost like a stray dog that hasn't seen food in years. I used to own a dog years ago named Jessica. She was a lovely Labrador, and she had died years ago at the age of 17. Anyway, I'm digressing here. This stuff kept going on and on for I don't know how long. I kept having trouble sleeping, but whenever I did get some sleep, I would end up waking up only to see a creepy gas mask-wearing man, or some other messed up thing, like the room closing in on me. If I was unlucky, I'd get to hear stuff. Sometimes it was music. Other times, creepy stuff like anguished moaning. The boxes kept appearing and disappearing whenever I did not look, and every single box contained the same barely cooked, stale, tasteless rice. I'll never eat rice again. At one point, I began seeing the gas mask man with increasing frequency, and for each time I had the pleasure of seeing him, I would bite my own arm until it bled. After the first few times, I figured out it made him disappear. Now it's all black, blue, and yellow. I guess it had gotten infected. Surprisingly, it doesn't even feel that painful or numb or anything, really. It feels natural. After who knows how long, I went to sleep inside that room and woke up on the side of the road next to a sign that says "Warning Danger, Underground Mine Fire." I was just outside of Centralia. I have no idea how I had gotten there. But that was 3 days ago, on the 14th of July. Someone locked me away for 2 weeks somewhere. I have no clue. I swear. The moment I reached civilization, I contacted local authorities regarding what had happened to me. But something odd had happened during the questioning. I mentioned that before this whole thing. I was hanging out with someone talking about this sort of thing. Psychological torture and isolation and all, but I couldn't name the person or describe them. In addition, I told the officers that I think I'm still being stalked or something. I keep seeing all sorts of people wearing long white coats, staring at me with concerned looks on their faces, and they all seem out of place. The weirdest thing I've come to realize now is that there are injection marks all over my arm. But I don't ever remember being injected with anything recently. They appeared only this morning, right after the arm with the bite marks stopped burning with pain, just a few moments after I had caught one of those weird people with the long white coats staring at me again. Now that the Central Intelligence Agency had released a significant number of documents into the public eye, even though officially these documents were public since 1995, they were simply kept in a certain place in a closed circuit. I have taken upon myself the liberty to read some of these files. I must admit some were bordering on the comedic. There was a lot of nonsense about aliens and even some information about the charlatan Uri Geller. There were also some more serious articles, but I am not going to delve into the details and bore you with them. I am here to talk about a single article that I found quite weird. It was this article about the possibility of prehistoric Egyptians having advanced technology, and by prehistoric, I mean pre-ancient Egyptian writing system or the pre-dynastic era of Egypt. Anyhow, this article speaks about a piece of stone on which some sort of text was recorded via what seems to be a laser-like mechanism. I am marking the beginning and the end of the translated text with high noon. The sun is scorching the golden sand we stand upon. May the gods forgive my blasphemous mouth. Right now, I am ready to sell my soul to any and every buyer who would offer a bit of water in exchange. It took 9 years of my life to finish this thing. I do not even know how many years some of the elders here lost to the mad dream of the mage. Now his body covers the eye of Ra. I can see him glide through the sky. Why, oh why is he lighter than the air itself? I can see the look on his face. Sheer terror shines in his eyes. The great mage, Epa, he is second to none, but His Holiness the King himself, neither in political power nor in personal power. Epa's power is so great he could regenerate lost limbs, control corpses, and the weather itself. There is, however, one thing he could not do, and that is to fly. His inability to reach the stars made him obsessed with them, and so he began studying them. He began devising plans to reach them. This led him to the conclusion that he needed to build a tower high enough to reach the top of the sky, to reach the gods themselves if he had to. In order to build such a tower, Epa needed a vast army of workers, and so he enslaved a vast majority of the kingdom's population with permission from the king. He had forced them to work on the construction of his tower by reanimating the bodies of the dead and turning them into his soldiers. He had embodied them with the ability to create magical whips and chains to control the slave masses. Everyone thought the gods would surely punish him for such actions, but nothing came of it. Epa would kidnap young children from their parents, raise them until they were 2 decades old, and fit to construct his tower. Such is my tale. I have seen those who are really old working on the construction of this wretched tower, while Eppa himself seems rather young in appearance. One may only guess how this is possible, perhaps due to sorcery. We kept working, no matter how harsh the conditions had gotten, in the heat and in the rain, during the day and during the night, even during the sandstorms unleashed by the wrath of Seth himself. Nothing came between Eppa and his will to fly, not even the constant dying of men in his slave army. People would simply fall down on the ground and lay there motionless from time to time. That had been commonplace around here. People would mostly die from exhaustion, while there were also those who died from the abuse we suffered at the hands of the Walking Dead soldiers who serve Eppa as his enforcers. The lucky ones, these would die in the sandstorms. Seth himself might have sent these storms as a mercy killing. The mage with the mad dream would not even honor those who die beneath him. He simply had us implant their dead shells into the walls of his tower to reinforce it further. People who inserted a certain amount of such dead began to become sickly themselves and ended up dying as well. Even that did not force the mage to stop the construction of his tower. For all he cared, he just got more reinforcement material for the walls of his masterpiece. I do not know why, but no one had ever tried to rebel against Eppa. I suppose he managed to steal our will with his sorcery. None of this matters, as the tower is completed and all eyes are set on the mighty mage who mere moments ago was climbing the steps to the top of the world, and now is falling like a rock to the sand that lies beneath our feet. The world had gone silent, and so did the great mage. As Eppa falls instead of rising, I scream internally, "Where are your stars? Are they far, mage? Are they far?" The world's silence is broken by a loud thud once the body of the mage hits the sand. He lays there motionless as blood stains the sands underneath him. All eyes are set on his unmoving body, and more thuds soon follow. The mage's Walking Dead army starts to fall to the ground, devoid of the magic that gave it life. Roars of freedom wash through the crowds of slaves who once again are becoming free men. Suddenly the noise stops, as all eyes are set once again on the mage who opens his eyes, a shocked look on his face. He tries to utter something, but the masses of newly freed men refuse to let him muster as much as a single word in fear of him using his sorcery to enslave them once more. The masses, myself included, rush to climb on top of the mage's body and the unmoving shells of his former army just to tear them all to bloody bits. Nothing is left of their bodies as we tear them limb from limb, skin from flesh, flesh from bone, and devour their carcasses in a display of dominance over them. While the wretched mage who had lost his dream screams in agony, as we slowly destroy his existence for any and all eternities. I tore out a large chunk of the mage's liver and consumed it with utmost pleasure. I hope the gods do not mind such mannerism from me. With the mage and his Walking Dead army nothing but a painful memory, we are free to go home. I am free to leave this place and go home. Both my eyes and my heart ache now, because I do not have a home. This is the only place I have ever known, but this is not a home. Where will I go now? I have nowhere to call home. Why did you have to die, Eppa? Why couldn't you just fly? Eppa, I look at my aching body and at the tower, and I see a rainbow decorating the skies. This will be the final thing that I will ever lay my eyes upon, as I am tearing them out, because of my inability to accept the sight of a world where I have no place to belong in. Fear not for me, for I will not be damned by my blindness, as I can feel Eppa's sorcery course through my veins now. Now, what I find weird about this text, besides it looking like a piece of mythology the Central Intelligence Agency took too seriously, is the fact that it is eerily similar to the lyrics of a certain song. And the lovers of rock and metal should agree with me here. This text is really similar to the lyrics of the song Stargazer by Rainbow. Even if this is a myth or whatever, this file was publicized officially only in 1995, but the song was written 19 years prior. So I have been bothered by this one thing. How the hell did Ritchie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio get their hands on this text back in 1976?